There's some encouraging new data as it relates to veteran homelessness, but let's not make any mistake about it. There's still plenty of important work left to do. According to disabled home veterans, as of January of 2024, an estimated number of 32,882 veterans were experiencing homelessness in the United States, marking an 8% decrease from 2023, which is the lowest number since tracking on this issue began in 2009. Despite a rise in general homelessness, targeted efforts reduced veteran homelessness by as much as 55% since 2010. It's estimated that veterans account for approximately 5% of adults who are experiencing homelessness worldwide. One man on a mission to change the status quo surrounding this issue is my friend, Jason Bennett. He's on a mission to ensure that people who served America never find themselves without a place to call home. As the founder of Operation Home for Heroes, he's focused on housing pathways for veterans experiencing homelessness, combining real-world partnerships with a stability-first approach, safe housing, supportive services, and community accountability. Bennett says that he didn't start out to start a nonprofit. He started because he wanted to rectify a problem he couldn't unsee. Bennett is a disabled veteran living in Los Angeles, and he says he's been witness to far too many veterans who get squeezed between the high cost of rent, complicated systems, and the silent weight they carry after service. Bennett and his board of directors member Sarah Snow joined me this week to have an authentic and honest conversation about common sense solutions which will hopefully rectify this issue, allowing veterans who serve our country to have a reliable, stable, and warm place to sleep and eventually turn it into their home. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. I started my conversation with Bennett by asking him why this mission is personally important to him.
Well, as a lot of us experienced after the war drew down in Afghanistan, just overnight, hundreds of thousands of us were either out of work or having to readjust to a different reality. A lot of guys come home to divorces. They wind up homeless not because they're responsible, but because deployments do that, and then you're really only qualified to be, a warrior. So you missed out on 15, 20 years of career advancement. The world's moved on. If AI isn't doing your job, it's going to take 4 years and a degree. And, time you don't have. And so a lot of guys wind up homeless. And what we'd like to do is get those individuals while saving the state money, because a lot of times they wind up, in the hospital, and that costs more money, or they wind up, you know, um, unfortunately ending their life or something, God forbid, and they have children. They can't even work to pay child support. So now the state winds up, you know, financially missing their contributions, as well as the kids missing the dad or mother. And so we just here at Homes for Heroes, we just try to get to them early. And we're currently bidding on the LA Safe program. So we would not only help homeless vets, but possibly FEMA displaced victims, and just generally whatever the state California needed us to do. When there was any vacancies.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. And I know that you're the founder of Operation Homes for Heroes, my friend, which you focus on housing for homeless vets. So tell me about the initiative, my friend, and why, when it was started, and what you want people to know about it, buddy.
Well, I couldn't have done it without my co-sponsor Sarah here, and so I'll let her take the lead on just where exactly we are in the process. But we are very recent. I think we started 2 months ago on this mission, and we're currently in the grant writing and the acquiring a property to essentially do this phase. So, Sarah, please take over and answer that question.
Yeah, so I've been working with Jason since last summer, and he is a visionary. He's got lots of wonderful ideas about ways to help veterans. I think if I could boil him down to one thing, is a man who very much wants to help veterans to find success and avoid despair and common pitfalls and being lost in the system when they come back home. And so we spent quite a bit of time discussing a variety of different things that could be done to help veterans. And a really big thing right now is simply just keeping them off the streets. It's very easy, like I said, to get lost in the administrative processes. Paperwork moves slow. Maybe they don't have the time or energy to follow through with all the steps that are required to utilize systems that are there, because the systems exist, but that doesn't mean that they're easily navigable and something that people feel comfortable doing. So what we want to do is help. Our mission is to bring veterans who are either experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness, get them into rapidly housed, help assist them get access to wraparound services, whether that be career training or mental health services, or just a myriad things that can be used to help them be in a safe place, to find themselves in a stable place, and then work them towards career advancement and finding success, whatever success means for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah, if you didn't mind, just explaining your role with the mission and what role that you play in this whole mission, my friend.
Well, I'm a member of the board of the nonprofit that Jason founded, and I'm kind of a boots on the ground, managing administrative work and whatnot. So just behind the scenes, trying to help make Jason's vision come true.
Absolutely. And Jason, I wonder your thoughts on, your view on what people really need to know about awareness and solutions when it comes to homeless veterans, my friend. Because if you're not invested in the issue firsthand, I'm not sure that a lot of people grasp the seriousness of this issue, my friend. So, what do you want people to know about the awareness behind this issue, my friend?
Well, a lot of people don't know that the post-war era was deadlier to Marines in particular, but all the branches. Since we left Afghanistan, nearly 2 to 1 uh, guys are committing suicide or overdosing or just falling into a level of depression, being back home, being essentially, you go from being a hero to, somebody who threw their life away on a 20-year war that we lost. And it's a completely, it's not like, when you came back from World War I and two, and, you were heroes, and there was, a ticker tape parade in the street, and everybody couldn't wait to give you a job. It's, you come home, and a lot of these guys are coming home to divorces. A lot of these guys are coming home and saying, well, we actually, we're looking for somebody younger, or looking for somebody with a degree in, something that, like coding or something that was invented while you were at war. I mean, it would be like going to war and then coming home, and them having invented something like a cell phone. What AI and coding and how fast technology has moved since the beginning of the war to the end of it. There's the guys that were just in like a 20-year gap of, their civils, their skills being able to translate into civilian, and that just going from being able to support a family to not even being able to support yourself. It's worse than combat. In combat, you can defend yourselves. We're good at that, and when you can't provide for your family and things of that nature, you literally have guys, feeling such a sense of dishonor, whereas they felt a sense of honor when they were doing their jobs. It was a scary job, but it was an honorable thing to do, to not be able to put food on the table for your family, and then not even for yourself. It's a deadly thing that we're trying to stop, because it's not just costing the city money and emergency room visits. And it's not just costing the VA money and extra care for these guys. If we can get them stable, we can literally save the state money and lives. And so we're in an era where there's just so much fraud in the system. We're having to combat that too. And so our goal is twofold: to not only help the veteran, but also to help the state balance its budget and its resources, and to show them, that not helping these guys get stable at a particular time winds up costing you more money in the end, and winds up, that kid's going to have mental health issues if his dad commits suicide, or winds up homeless, through a divorce. And maybe he doesn't commit suicide, but you grow up without a dad, and he falls into, an abyss of, drinking or painkillers or something, when he was, yesterday, he was a useful member of society that was at war. And now his society is not at war. I mean, we've got guys on the sidelines praying that we go to war in Iran just so there'll be jobs. So that's a horrible thing to pray for, but it's what these poor guys are dealing with. Their job skills are just so useless in peacetime. And then to have, the revolution, the AI revolution, it's like the .com revolution, or the cell phone being invented. It's such a huge revolution. It's putting people out of school, out of work, that went to school 5 years ago. So to be in your 40s talking about going back to college, and being having to support a family already, and you know, in your mind, hopefully you were at a point in your career to where, you should be in management, instead of having to start over in a new career, go into debt, and, you'd be looking at your 60s before you're even breaking even on your student loans and your training, and the years lost for that. And so this sense of hopelessness is causing a mental health crisis, which is causing a suicide crisis, which, if we can solve the homelessness part and get them connected to services, we believe that we would literally become a net positive as far as financially to the state, and obviously a huge positive in the life of these men and women who have sacrificed so much for our country. And
And
so,
I want to add in there to say, part of the thing that comes from serving in the military is a brotherhood and a sisterhood. It's you're on a team and you're working together. But in civilian life, these vets are navigating a system that can feel cold, fragmented, and slow, and that disconnect can feel like a personal failure. And so part of what we want to help is to change that, to help them not feel like they're failing, but to show them that it's a disconnect, it's a failure of the pipeline, it's a failure of the system, and to give them that support to not feel like they're failing in life.
Bennett also shares some comprehensive thoughts on the importance of providing homeless veterans with a sense of community and social connection, which he believes is critically important for their overall development of an identity once they get off the battlefield and come back home.
Yeah, honestly, this mission, it started for me because I went through exactly what I just described, minus having biological children. Anyway, the sense, I looked around and I saw that I wasn't the only one suffering like that. And I thought there's, and then I'm looking at the news every day and I'm seeing, there's so much fraud in these programs. I think there's got to be a way to provide a better service than the government's currently getting ripped off for. And, it started there. And, it's something to be able to go into a home and not be homeless. It's something else entirely to be able to have a job again where you're earning that home. And so it's a twofold mission. When you have a paycheck in your hands, it just makes you feel different. And you pray for peace. You go to war to make a more peaceful world. And so it's not, you don't want conflict. Everybody's praying for an end to war. That's never going to happen. But in these gaps, we have to realize that these young men can, be wildland firefighters. I mean, the Palisades burned down, and you know how many out of work Marines there were, that would have been happy to go out there with a shovel and or have to go out there with whatever piece of equipment. And I mean, they've been to firefights literally, so they're not scared to fight fires. We have a program right now that essentially will be bidding on sort of like a wildland firefighter National Guard. So, you train 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year after going to some type of firefighting certification, and you'd be paid sort of like in the National Guard, and you'd be deployed during FEMA emergencies. And hopefully that takes off, and then it gives these guys who we are providing housing to, a job on the side until they can land something permanent. And obviously, if it becomes sort of like a FEMA National Guard or a wildland fire task force or whatever that they're being paid, on the side to do, that could save huge costs for the state, because you don't need a huge standing fire department. What you need is, when an emergency happens, a hurricane or a fire or something like that, enough resources to throw at it, fix the problem, spare the land, so that billions of dollars worth of real estate isn't lost, and then the state loses millions of dollars in taxes every year by not being able to tax that real estate, and then they're not being able to provide the homeless services they were last year. Everybody's taxes are going up, businesses are leaving. I mean, we've got to find a way to save California. And it's just, we sort of see ourselves as a killer beast, and the American taxpayer is a worker bee, and then we can see the hive is going bankrupt, and it's not only us suffering, but it's everybody right now. And so the goal is twofold: to find a way to help these vets, but to do it in a way that's cost effective for the state, so that we can provide value. Because obviously, we don't want to be asking for something without providing something, to the government itself, in the form of savings and hopefully better care by veterans, for veterans, that is more like, I feel like I know what these guys need more than some other people do. And I definitely think that Sarah's got a great vision, and we've had some other board members that we're bringing on, and hopefully, come mid-year, we're going to have some positive things to come back on this podcast and talk about. Some lives saved, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Now, I'm curious to get your thoughts on these findings from the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, my friend, because they reported that at the end of 2024 that the number of homeless veterans has actually dropped by approximately 50% since 2009 and currently stand, which is a decrease of between 7.5% and 8%, my friend, between 2023 and 2024. So, what immediately comes to mind when you hear those numbers, and are you encouraged at all that more people are shining a light on this issue? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I
Let me
think,
speak to that one, huh, Jason?
yeah.
I think it's very encouraging, and it proves that veteran homelessness is solvable. And encouragement comes with urgency. There's a decrease of 7 or 8% in the last year, but there are still tens of thousands of homeless veterans, and it's a personal that's what makes it personal, is that every veteran counts. Every person who has put their life on the line to serve this country deserves to have a warm place to sleep, a hot meal in their belly, and to feel safe and respected and secure, and to feel important, because they all matter. And so I think it's wonderful that there is a decrease in veteran homelessness, and it shows that the programs are working. And that's why additional programs are needed. We need as many people out there working hands-on to solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And either Sarah or Jason, you can add to this question because, according to the National Coalition of Homeless Veterans, my friend, they say that as of January of 2024, an estimated 32,882 veterans were experiencing homelessness on a single night in the U.S., making again roughly an 8% decline. And they also say that black homeless veterans are experiencing homelessness higher than any other group. So I'm wondering, how do we target that specific segment of our population, and what can be done to help black veterans specifically in your view? What are your thoughts there?
I
Well,
think that,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
Sure. Ladies first.
I was just going to say, there are certainly barriers and inequalities in the system. There can be issues with access to fair and equal housing, and that can certainly be a barrier. So, the solution has to include, by design, targeted prevention and culturally competent and sensitive outreach. And landlord accountability to make sure that race is not an invisible barrier that's preventing soldiers from being housed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jason, just I wanted to go back to the idea of you experiencing serving yourself, and you say that people really need to know that homeless veterans can be people they went to school with or that they grew up with, and they really need to have an all hand on deck approach to solve this problem, my friends. So tell me about the need for the general public to get involved into solving this problem and really giving a sense of a social community to these homeless veterans, which can also ultimately lead to a place to call home. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I just like the population to remember, these every one of these young men and women were volunteers. They didn't have to get drafted to serve. They put their lives on the line and to serve their country. And now 20 years later, we think as a society maybe differently about the war, but at the time it was, these individuals stepping up, and now, there's two ends of the spectrum. It costs a lot of money once you let them fall through the cracks, and they need drug rehabs, and they need, special services. It winds up costing the state more once you get a veteran to that point than it would be the early prevention and the housing assistance and things of that nature. Second, we want to not only be thankful, we do live in maybe the greatest country in the world as far as looking after its vets post-war, but we do send a lot of vets to war. And what we need to understand is these men they're dangerous when they don't have a job, and they're winding up dangerous to themselves most of the time. But you know it's not some kid that lost his Sega Genesis privileges or something. It's an individual who was trained to hunt people, now doesn't have a job and is growing bitter on the street, and he winds up either turning the weapon on himself sometimes, or God forbid, something worse. I think that we're preventing shootings. I think, we're preventing suicides. We're preventing kids not growing up with their dad or mom. And, hopefully, as that expands, we're able to create a veterans union and sort of keep these guys and gals employed, so God forbid when the next war happens and when it finally ends, which is a great thing, war ending is a great thing. You have a society that's better able to absorb them back into the workforce. And I think that, this was not really nobody's fault. It was just one of those things that, between the AI revolution happening at the same time and just normal people losing jobs to that, and then coming back, from wartime to peacetime, you need obviously a lot less combat ready individuals, but now you have men and women who are only been, good at combat. There's only so many police jobs or jail jobs or guard jobs. And so, it's hard for an economy to, even as great as ours, to absorb all those individuals, and we're just trying to do our part to prevent the next tragedy. And we want to thank the American taxpayer, the American people, for supporting us. We really do, and we want to thank you for bringing us on the podcast today.
Yeah, and just to build on your last answer, what do you think it means to have a clean path to stability? Either one of you can answer that question.
Feel free.
That's a great question. I don't know about a clean path, because I see each person as needing something individual. And I think that's part of the reason why people can get lost in the system. So it's very important to have, on the intake of someone who's homeless, someone who recognizes them as a human and their individual needs, and is able to provide access to the various symptoms of support that they might need. Maybe they need a companion. Maybe they need a dog that's trained to assist someone who is lonely and experiencing PTSD, to help give them someone to care for. There's not, I don't think there's no one size fits all. Each person is individual, and each person deserves to be treated like an individual. And while they all deserve to have keys and a home, the services that surround them should really be stylized to what is going to best help them to find happiness, success, and to have life feel meaningful.
And Jason, I'm curious to get your perspective on the same question, but I'm also wondering your thoughts, because you say that this issue is not only a policy issue, as you've articulated, it's also a human one, my friend. So with that as a backdrop, my friend, tell me about your perspective on how we get back to a path to stability. What are your thoughts, my friend?
Well, as I said, that sort of that FEMA force, that FEMA National Guard, was one of the ideas, is sort of providing the dignity of work to even disabled vets that maybe they can't hold a job throughout the year, but would be happy to do something like that. Um, Mostly, it's once you get them off the street and then connected to the resources. Not only does the state find it cheaper to do it from that place, but just like Sarah said, everybody needs a little something different. I can only relate to the sort of the emptiness of sort of being useless. A force protection anti-terrorism specialist is sort of a useless person when there are no terrorists. He's very valuable when there's a war on, and so just overnight you you sort of have to figure out, what am I providing as a value to society, and what I can market to society to get society to want to keep me housed, and so that's sort of my struggle right now. But a lot of guys, they really not looking for a handout. They're looking for a way to climb out of the abyss of somehow losing a war that we didn't lose. And you know most of your buddies are either dead or they've married and moved on, and it's not the same. There's that huge, and if you're one of the 10 or one of the 11 or one of the 25 or whatever the statistics are that fall through the cracks and wind up homeless, how do we get to that guy before he ends his life? And then bringing in experts like Sarah, and she's brought in some other people that can essentially get them from housing to owning their own house, and getting that dignity back. And it's fixing the total problem, getting them back from war to the PTSD, housed, and then back to being a taxpayer and a home, whether maker or at least provider, or whatever essentially gets them back to net zero, to where essentially they're not a problem for society, they're not a problem for themselves, and we're sort of completing the cycle of they made a sacrifice and now they're down and out. And it's not only financially beneficial for us to help them before it becomes expensive later, but also, or they become justice involved or something like that, but also we do owe that to them. And I certainly feel there are guys and gals out there that have it worse than me, and so that's why I couldn't just sit on the sidelines being happy in Santa Monica when there are so many that are being snowed on or rained on right now. You make it off the beach and then you look back and your platoon ain't there. You got to find a way to save the rest of the platoon.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah, I've got one question left for you, and I've got two quick ones left for Jason. And I'm curious from an administrative perspective and from an operations perspective overall. From a government perspective, from a political end, I'm wondering your message to political leaders within Los Angeles and around the country about the role that they can play to help put a dent in this issue. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I see. I think most politicians are very supportive of our brothers and sisters in service. In politics, it's going to control the funding, the rules, the priorities that can accelerate housing solutions or slow them down. So I think keeping veterans bipartisan, and making sure that policy moves forward to support them and not leave them in the dust.
Yeah,
Veterans are not talking points; they are human beings that have literally volunteered to serve our country.
yeah, absolutely. And Jason, I'm curious to end on this two-part question, my friend. I'm wondering your thoughts on how you define transformational change and impact on this issue, and if you had a message to homeless veterans about the concept of preserving hope as they work through this process, what would that be, my friend?
Um, I know that Sarah works very hard every day on these grants and try to provide this housing in LA and hopefully to other parts of the United States. And certainly I'm fully invested in this. I'm all in on it, and the help's coming, guys. I can't tell you when. I can only tell you that we're pulling no punches. We're sparing no expense. We're going to get the message to the right people and the right politicians and get this funding and get this going. And like I said, we gotta approach it in a way to where we can show the politician that this is actually going to save you money in the end, and to that remind them with respect that these are not people that got drafted. These are not people that had to be forced. You asked them to put their lives on the line for the country, and we're not asking you to defund something else. We're saying the money's already there. We can actually do it more efficiently, and we can connect into permanent housing. We have another individual. She essentially buys houses at auction and then refinances them, or assist veteran families in purchasing these houses, sometimes 40, 50, $60,000 cheaper than it would go on Zillow right then and there. So she's, the goal would be to fix the problem, and for this person not to be on a housing voucher long term, for this person to be back and up and running, and be a positive for society themselves as quickly as possible. So we definitely thank all the politicians on both sides of the aisle that we're certainly hoping that when the budget comes through, there's some money for our programs. We certainly appreciate all the access podcasters like you of uh, bringing light to this issue and helping us get this message out.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before I ask how people can get involved, I forgot to ask about the specific issues that are present in Los Angeles. Because I know the cost of living in Los Angeles is already through the roof with the price of building a home and the price of just paying rent, as Jason, you mentioned earlier. So I'm wondering, Sarah or Jason, if you could give me just a quick couple of minutes on the issues specific to Los Angeles that are plaguing homeless vets, and what you're hoping to do about it.
We've seen homelessness really explode in Los Angeles. It's always been an issue, but it's really become very distraught over the years. From moving from Skid Row, which is, a long known area where folks have been living on the streets, to now the streets of Hollywood. Everywhere you will see folks with tents on the sidewalks. It's something that people are experiencing at a very high rate, and a lot of it is driven, as you mentioned, by the high cost of housing. And while there are such, the cost to rent or buy or build are very astronomical and can feel out of reach, there are many units that sit empty. And that's what we look to try to help with, is taking empty units that are sitting, maybe they need a little bit of construction, maybe they need a little bit of revamping, and getting them opened back up to help people find places off the streets.
Yeah, absolutely. And just finally, tell me, if people want to get connected or involved with your mission, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, of course, you can reach out to us. We've got a website. It's operationhomesforheroes.org. And we have a fundraiser on Zephy.com, which is a fundraising system for nonprofits. So I'll share that link with you if you want to put it in the description for the show. Yeah, every little bit helps. $5 might put a warm coffee in a vet's hands while we talk with them about what they need. So, those are a couple great ways. And of course, we're interested. We have a few board members right now, but we're open to more. We want to grow. We're going to become large and successful and get as many vets off the streets as we can. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me to engage in conversation about this important issue, and I want to thank you both for being here this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
It's very appreciated. Thank you so much for the access, and thank you so much for your time, sir. Have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you.